Hi, my name is Trey Hayden, and I am the person working on the Quest 64 Unity remake. If you've been following the project for a while, you may know that I try to post an update every day for the month of October, and for this year I wanted to include a short recap of the month's work, as well as an update for the project overall. So for this video, I'd like to cover 4 topics, the first being just the overall goals for the challenge, a brief recap of the kinds of work done for the month, what's in store for the near future of the project, and lastly, just responding to some frequently asked questions that usually show up in the comment section of the posts more than once. So for the overall goals, there are 3 main ones. The first being just some sort of accountable progress. I've been trying to, in recent years, deprioritize the influence of external motivation on what I choose to work on and choose to share. You may have noticed I don't share a whole ton of current work on socials or Discords, even with friends, honestly. And the goal has been to have a healthier internal motivation for completing work, where I don't want myself to sort of shift gears to show something that may do better on socials or get praise from individuals online, and then feel like I have to keep working on this to satisfy that drive, and then not work on things that I know would make my life easier actually working on the project. Things like tool development, which hasn't been particularly popular in socials, but as far as actually getting work done is invaluable. The second is just to get a sense for what people actually enjoy seeing. So this does conflict a little bit with my desire for less external motivation, but I do think it helps as a game developer to have some sense of, well, what sorts of content will do well on the various platforms, their algorithms, their audiences, that kind of thing. But it's also just a way of making sure I mix things up because obviously, again, I mentioned tool development isn't super thrilling for people, but for whatever reason, they love doors, they love seeing Brian go through a door, they love vegetation, spell visuals do well, particle systems do well, and so making sure that there is some sort of mix between the things that I want to work on and the things that I think will be fun for the folks following on social, which also gives me a break from doing something difficult and just working on a particle system. And the last overall goal is that I wanted to, at least for this year, try to give a more realistic view of what progress looks like for me. And that includes days where there just isn't anything kind of camera ready. This one's pretty important to me because I think so much of the content I see on socials for game development are posts where you only get the sunny side of things, right? Like, this person's just made a breakthrough, or their model turned out well, or their spell effect turned out well, or their environment turned out well. It's all very pretty and it's curated. And I think it gives a misleading view of what this field is like, what this hobby is like, particularly as a solo dev on a project, where in reality a lot of your days are just kind of what feel like chiseling through a wall with your fingernails, where there isn't something camera ready, you didn't know enough to accomplish this, what you did know was insufficient, and you just had to learn. And so I wanted to make sure that not every single day was, again, something fun, right? To actually have days where I just say, hey, this didn't work out, I didn't know enough, I needed to look at something, I'm reviewing something, I'm thinking about something, and there's nothing fun for you to look at. So, check back tomorrow. So for the actual work that was accomplished this month, there were 3 main areas I wanted to target. The first being tools and planning. So I mentioned recently that for folks who've been following along with the project for a while, that it might seem like kind of backwards progress to be blocking out areas that I'd previously shown with visuals and assets. And this is 100% intentional. I realized earlier in the year that I had not been anywhere near rigorous enough for how I'd handled unit conversions and overlays, and so whenever I would play casually or do the Lua work or speedrun the game, it felt really discordant to be in the Unity project and your brain has associations for where are things, how does the camera look, what's in frame, and I was just so rarely getting that feeling with the Unity project that it was almost like too off. And it's one of those moments where you have to kind of just bite your lip and accept that you made a mistake. and go back and resolve things. And so that's what I did. I ended up scrapping basically every area that I'd previously done, and I am now going through the process, it's just about done, of rebuilding them with blocks to make sure that the conventions are correct, the conversions are correct, and that they line up with the work that Cal has done to export the actual models, where I'm at the point where I can overlay his model exports onto the navigation data I'm using, and they sync up, which is great. And just this general feel of like moving through the area, it feels significantly different than it did before, which is a good thing. The second goal for this month has been just to try and port some of the original systems into the Unity project. This relies quite heavily on the tremendous work done by the decomp team, so Malos, Rain, and Landmine. And so far, things like Brian's movement and the fixed camera are in and probably aren't going to change a whole ton. But also the follow camera is in, with a little bit of reservation about how much I want to keep that with the original. Whenever I see people do a first playthrough or I hear people's complaints about the game, the follow camera is very high on their list of issues. So I think this is an opportunity to sort of have a second iteration of that camera mode and say what are some things that it did well, what are some of the clever conventions they were able to work out with it, but also what are some things that people disliked about it that are an area for improvement this time around. And the third area, and these were definitely the fun days, were working out things for spell visuals. I have a gigantic Trello list that I've been keeping track of for which spells have functioning visuals and which don't. And the last few for the month, for the project in general, were the 2 Rolling Rocks, Fire Pillar, and Magma Ball. I had never quite been sure of how to do this, I just didn't have enough shader knowledge or understanding about the particle system or the decal system, that kind of stuff. But I think each of these turned out fairly well. And so they'll probably just stay the way they are for now. I can't imagine that these would be the least polished visuals that needed attention. But I was pretty pleased with how these turned out, and they all seem to do quite well on socials. So for the project's immediate future, as mentioned, I would like to go back through and make sure that everything up to solvering is blocked out again, just to make sure I really capture the feel of the original, that things seem right, the view is right, that kind of stuff. And then once everything is tracking on that end, I'll start to go through them and say, okay, well, now I'll add vegetation, now I'll flesh out some of the interiors, now it's ready for assets, that kind of stuff. But if it's not feeling right with just the blocks, then I don't feel like it's worth adding assets yet. And the second major effort is to start commissioning the minor NPCs for the area. I think up to solvering, you can encounter like 50 unique NPC models just in that little bit of gameplay. And while this is great from a player perspective, because it never reuses a model, it is a little bit daunting from a developer's perspective, especially with how expensive a single 3D model can be sometimes. So this may be an area where I do finally just bite the bullet and learn how to use Blender in like a more useful capacity, right? I know how to edit models. I know how to sculpt a little bit in order to do blend shapes like I did for Shannon's blinking. But I've never made like an actual model to go into the Quest project yet, right? Like I did stuff for Dive, but that was all very prototypical shapes. And this would be something new, and I think it's just a useful talent to have. And so I'll probably end up doing a little bit of both, but I would love to have the NPCs start replacing the Among Us guys. So in closing, I want to get to some of the common questions that pop up during the month of October whenever I start posting more frequently. And the first one, and I think the most important one for me, is whether or not there is some sort of mechanism to support the project financially, either through a Patreon or a Ko-Fi or some sort of direct donation, that kind of stuff. And while these sentiments are very much appreciated and they give me like a warm and fuzzy feeling, the answer is plainly and unequivocally no. There is not currently, nor will there ever be, some sort of vehicle with which you can support the project financially. I feel very strongly about this. This is a fan-made project. I don't want any sort of financial support. because I'm doing this out of a love for Quest 64 and how much it's meant to me throughout my life. So again, while the sentiment is very much appreciated, this is not something that's going to change. And in the odd event that my career takes some sort of nosedive and end up trying to become some sort of game dev YouTuber or something equally odd, I don't want anyone to use any future vehicles for financial donations to somehow indirectly support the Quest project. So I don't know how to be any clearer about that, but no, there is no current or future way to support the project financially. Over. The second most common question, which is similar but different, is, well, how do I contribute to the project in a talent sense, not in a financial sense? So maybe you are a composer, maybe you're a 3D modeler, maybe you're an animator, maybe you do really nice texture work, that kind of stuff, right? And I'm very much down to work with those folks for those kinds of collaborative opportunities. But as long as there's, again, no money changing from your hand to mine, only from my hand to yours, right? I want to make sure that artists are reimbursed for their good work, for the amount of time they've spent honing their craft. And at first I was worried about the kinds of different assets in the project, and that they would all have a little bit of a different style since so many people have contributed work, either paid or otherwise, to the project. But at this point I think it's kind of endearing, and I almost look forward to a new style kind of joining the bunch. And the last actual question I get, other than just asking if that's the kid from Quest 64, is with regard to, well, how far is the project going to go? So the original plan was just to go up until Solvering, where I do the Monastery, Melroad Town, Holy Plains, Dondrin Castle, Connor, and then the Solvering encounter. This is still the immediate plan, but I'm wondering if that's enough for some sort of playable demo. Given the number of people who got stuck on Solvering, it might be. But I would also like to sort of say, okay, well, if the tools are in place to easily add other areas and that kind of stuff, what else could I maybe squeeze in that would add to the original sort of content lineup up to Solvering without being a ton of extra work? So maybe there's a different side area for Holy Plains, in the same way that Glencoe is sort of a side area for Dondrin Flats, or kind of like Romancing Saga 3, where one of the main towns just has a crypt under it or something. Maybe there's something in Dondrin to explore there. There's that weird door in the Melroad Monastery basement that doesn't go anywhere. So I think there are areas to sort of use the design and themes present in the original and add some sort of additional, almost like Classic Plus content, without requiring a whole bunch of additional assets. And so I'm floating that idea, but it also does deviate quite a bit from the original, so I'm not 100% sure on it. But as far as the actual roadmap for the project itself, distance will depend primarily on tool development and how much my own art abilities in Blender improve and the timeline in which they improve. Over. And if you're still here, thank you very much for following along with the project. Thanks for following along with this video as I ramble a little bit about my feelings about the project and my feelings about the Devtober stuff in general each year. Feedback and praise are, I think, a bit addictive, but also nice to hear. And so even if I'm trying to minimize how much it influences me, I do still appreciate people's thoughts and general comments. Every now and then I'll get one of the posts that has a really nice comment on it, and it'll really just make my day. So thank you very much for sharing those sentiments with me. But otherwise, yeah, hope you have a great day, and thank you very much.